gathering people here for something, we know how to do that. The one-on-one stuff, the discipling in just, 2 or 3 at a time, that's harder. And I think, I think about Jesus with children, he blesses, touch. I can just see he's got his hand on each one of their heads, offers them a blessing. I don't know how long that took, but my guess is it took a while. If I could have been there to help out, to orchestrate things, I would have said, you just have everybody show up together at 6 o'clock. We do a general blessing. We'll have some music and we'll send you on your way. And then, Jesus and his buddies can go get a hamburger or something like that. But that's not how it worked.
By all counts and measures that you'd set up a church, this church is knocking it out of the park already. You guys have wonderful congregation, great ministries. You guys are baptizing people. The church is growing. You've got a wonderful age spread in this church, great facilities, wonderful balance sheet. What are you trying to accomplish here, man?
I agree. Let's shut this thing down.
Matt, there's this theological force majeure around here called Sherry McCollum.
Yeah. So I get this all the time. They say the wrong person in that family went to seminary. Like she is a dynamic teacher. She's a part of a group called Community Bible Study. So it's 250 women that get together to study the Bible. She's actually the area director, so she's in charge of this group and in Mobile and Foley, some of the other areas around here. So she's a powerhouse. I will say too, she's okay with being a pastor's wife, which is no small thing. I will say when she was in elementary school, her boyfriend had a pony and he was a PK. So I think when I talked to her about going to seminary, she thought, oh, well, then the pony comes with that. Yeah. So it actually was fairly easy to talk her into that kind of thing. She's been very disappointed since then. We have not had any horses come into our life.
And so, Matt, I wanted to ask you, how did you really move from thinking discipleship was really evangelism and getting more people active in the church and see it more as the personal development of extending the kingdom of God by showing love to other people? How did you make that transition?
Well, and I don't know that I've arrived. These are aspirational kinds of things for me as well. But I do think making the church the goal or the end is a recipe for disaster, right? So the church is an instrument, is a tool. It's not the fourth member of the Trinity. Deep roots here. We raised our children here. We still feel a deep sense of call here. So I guess the downside of that is after 16 years, I'm not sure that people are listening to me anymore. They, so not to jump ahead in the conversation, but that's where you guys have come in for me. So it's helpful to me to have someone to come in to speak into this space that's not my voice.
We're talking today with a Princeton theologian who also happens to be a PK, a pastor's kid, who also happens to have a really wicked sense of humor and a pastor's heart, leading a church as they explore the dilemma around discipleship and what it might mean for a cultural transition from churchianity, the traditional way of thinking about church, to the fuller call of discipleship in Christ. Matt McCollum, senior pastor of Trinity Presbyterian Church, Fairhope, Alabama, joins us today on the Disciple Dilemma to explore what it really means to try to turn a culture toward the full call of Christ's discipleship. Here we go.
Usually we're welcoming people onto the podcast, but I get the privilege today of actually being at the place where our wonderful guest is. And this is really cool because I'm getting to hang out with a disciple who's a PK, a pastor's kid, right, who's a husband to Sherry. That's a really powerful force we have to talk about. Dad, senior pastor at Trinity Presbyterian Church, Fairhope, Alabama, and they're on a journey about discipleship. So I expect you to be on really good behavior today, Ray, as we get going
Okay.
with the disciple.
I'll try. I'll try my best. I mean, they don't teach us that good of manners down at Auburn. We didn't go to that state school where the really important people go.
Matt, welcome to the Disciple Dilemma.
Thanks. It's great to be with you guys. And it is odd to have an Alabama and an Auburn guy sitting across from me. And when we first got here, folks said we had to declare, you had to declare. And I have not declared 16 years into this, and I'm not starting today either. So, but it's good to be with both of you all. So.
In churches, it used to be that the most contentious stuff you really had to talk about was SEC football and maybe, how the meal down at the diner went. I'm just curious as we kick this conversation off, Matt, what do you hear from friends that have gone into ministry as pastors? What kind of force are they feeling, seeing, and what kind of experiences they have?
These days, there's all kinds of pressures on the local pastors. And I think, we've gone through a pandemic. There was just no way to win on that, depending on what tribe you belong to, what your, larger denomination is doing. There's stuff coming at you with that. The political situation right now is really, really heavy. And again, there are, I think, pastors who are being asked to, kind of wade into that, whether they want to or not. So I think, it's a really difficult time to be, give leadership to a church. I'm a part of a group called the Foundation for Reformed Theology. And the three keys they say is preaching, teaching, and care. And I think I appreciate that, but boy, that's kind of the load of stuff that a pastor has to deal with nowadays is so much more than that, right or wrong. So I think it's a pretty discouraging time for pastors. Now, it kind of does depend on what part of the world you live in. Being a pastor in the Deep South, church still works here in a way. If you're thinking about trying to put people in the pew and, kind of pay the bills, that kind of stuff, it doesn't work in other parts of the country. I've got friends who are leading churches in Chicago and Portland and some other areas where it's just, it's really different, kind of sledding in those areas too. So I'm certainly no expert on the state of pastors these days, but it's got to be tough, I think.
The traffic pattern of friends, I wonder, and this is just a question we toss to a lot of our pastors who join us, is that a lot of them are discouraged in walking away from this because it's just really, really painful to put up with people like me. It is. I fully embrace my humanity and my sin nature, but I think about, do you have friends who have already decided or are really seeking to get out of ministry who are out there?
Well, I'm in a covenant group with 6 other guys that we were friends in seminary and have continued to be together for those, each year we get together. So 4 of the 6 of us are still in regular pastoral ministry. One works for a more denominational agency, and the other is kind of in between right now. So in our group, we've actually kind of stuck with it, but I don't know that that's typical. So, I would say for me, there's been great advantages to having been here 16 years. So a very wise person early on in my ministry, she was a Presbyterian exec. So in our world, this would be a group of churches, and she said that every pastor will get to some kind of crisis point in like year 4 to 6. And if you can push through that, the ministry that's there on the other side is much more fruitful, like exponentially fruitful than those first years. And I think she's exactly right.
Wow.
But my sense is about 5 years, you'll have a pastor transit. You'll move to a different church. And I tend to think that's because you get that pushback, get a little bit of that conflict. And it's just easier to go than to try to make it work. And so here we've moved through a couple of those periods now, but because of the trust that gets built, we seek to be, kind of transparent in the way we operate and just love people, that it's been easier I think for me to deal with. For example, the pandemic was awesome around here. Not awesome. I know it was really difficult for lots of people. We lost some really great people, but as far as the church is concerned, we had a ball over here. And so it's really a God thing. We had a piece of property that we bought here on this block. We thought we were buying a parking lot, some extra place to park cars. Turned into literally bought it, tore the house down that was on it, landscaped it. It was pretty as a park, like 2 months before everything shut down. And so that became our worship space. And we worshiped there for, better part of a year. And people would drive their golf carts up. I mean, I don't know what was going on in the back where I couldn't tell what was going on. They were having a lot of fun over there. So, I'm assuming we were all worshiping. I don't know that for sure. But I do think those kinds of things that time was really hard for a lot of pastors who didn't have kind of the trust and the deep, deep friendships. And that was helpful for us. I know that being deeply rooted in a place is not going to be for everybody. That's not going to be the thing for everybody. But for us, it's been really helpful in navigating those things.
How have you struggled or benefited from being in the same place 16 years in terms of the friendships and personal relationships you've made?
Yeah, I think that's great insight, and that those deep friendships will have just helped us navigate lots of challenging kinds of things. Sure. It enables us to go more quickly because there's already that level of trust there. We do have deep roots here. We raised our children here. We still feel a deep sense of call here. So I guess the downside of that is after 16 years, I'm not sure that people are listening to me anymore. Not to jump ahead in the conversation, but that's where you guys have come in for me. So it's helpful to me to have someone to come in to speak into this space.
Yeah.
That's not my voice. We had Dennis come in on a Saturday, even before your book came out.
Yeah.
And you took a morning with not just our church board, but people who are a part of the, kind of leadership of the church.
Sure.
And Dennis just basically went through here's the current state of the church in the West.
Yep.
And I think people were pretty shocked by that because they're not getting that from me. I don't kind of have that perspective. And so there are big benefits to being deeply rooted in this place, but I think it's also benefits to having someone from the outside to come and speak harder truth to folks and help people to get a little more perspective on things. This is, as I said before, church still works here. People come here. This is where they see their friends. They're connected. We hope on some path towards becoming more the people God has called them to be, but they don't have a sense of what's going on in the world other than when I ask them why their kids and grandkids don't go to church.
So, Matt, one real quick follow-up on that. When we talk to, and Dennis has told me this any number of times, you talk to people about those statistics and the challenges, and they go, that's certainly a problem in the church, but not here. We're good here. So if you had a good church there, why in the world would your leadership say, this is something we need to do something about, instead of saying, well, that's a problem in Chicago, but it's not a problem here in Fairhope?
Oh, you're exactly right. And I think when I think about the pushback, that's it. Is there really a dilemma? That's the question people are asking, because it doesn't feel like that to them personally.
Yeah.
And so, that's something after Dennis was here, and then of course it took a while before the book actually came out, but we actually read through that book chapter by chapter. It took us like a whole year to read through the thing and just chew on each of those sections together and try to just wrestle with that question, like, is there really a problem? Because I think that is there a felt need? Well, that's hard. That's hard for our folks. And then if you ask people to change and they're not convinced that there's actually a problem, then that's hard. So I think it's Ron Heifetz that has that definition of leadership. It's something like leadership is disappointing people at a rate they can stand, or something like that. So change is always loss, right? Even if there's positives, always going to be loss involved. So for me, it's helping to kind of walk a group through this in a way that we can think about how might we change here in a way that folks can handle.
Of all the chapters you guys reviewed, which ones really were either surprising or fundamentally challenging to the church you're pastor of? Which ones did people go, oh, wow, this is something that really changes the way I understand or the way I think about where we are and where we need to go?
Yeah, I think I would say the idea that most resonated with people is just the idea that we have for so long assumed discipleship by gathering people instead of actually developing discipleship. So I think that makes sense to people, that just because you gather people together in a room or you put together a program that lots of people attend doesn't necessarily mean that folks are going to be different tomorrow than they are today, or transformed in some way. So this is kind of this is a story from way back, so I don't step on anybody's toes, but because I've got but before I even went to seminary, I was actually at a church in Meridian, that I know you've got some connection with. And there was a guy there at this church he was like the guy that you just had, everything had to go through him. So he was the property guy, he was the session guy, he was the guy. So, and everybody's got that guy in their church or girl in their church. So we had a church that was in a changing neighborhood. And so we had some basketball courts out in the back. And so there was just a group of folks who kind of found our church and began to play basketball there. They just weren't our people, kind of thing, one of those situations. It was, concerning to whoever that this group of people was out using our basketball hoop. This guy went out one night and took down the basketball.
Oh,
just unbolted the thing and took it back to his house. And I remember just being absolutely shocked that this guy who taught the big Sunday school class in church was on the session, was the guy that everything happened through, had just such a bitter, racist spirit that he would something like that. And I remember thinking, and I was, it was not on the session or anything like that, but I just thought, like, we ought to call a session meeting and find out what has happened to Bob. Just the fact that you've hung out with church people for a while doesn't mean that you have, just received God's grace and been transformed by it.
By all counts and measures that you'd set up a church, this church is knocking it out of the park already. You guys have wonderful congregation, great ministries. You guys are baptizing people. The church is growing. You've got a wonderful age spread in this church, great facilities, wonderful balance sheet. What are you trying to accomplish here, man?
I agree. Let's shut this thing down. Yeah, I do think I agree with there are a lot of good things going on in the church, but I do think kind of having just a sense of responsibility for my leadership here.
Sure.
I do recognize that there's an easier way to do church and there's a harder way to do church. So we know how here to gather a group of people. I can put together a talk. We can put together a program. We're very traditional here. We just bought a pipe organ. I don't know how many churches can say they bought a pipe organ, but that just gives you a sense. The church is really traditional, but it's a great pipe organ. And if you're into traditional music, this is a great place to do that. So we can actually do church in a way that's, we're not bad at it. So the question is, why would we do something harder? I have no idea, but I do think it is the right thing to do. And I think part of the pushback that I have, we've talked about the pushback from the congregation. My pushback is that it's harder and messier.
Mm-hmm.
And so gathering people here for something, we know how to do that. The one-on-one stuff, the discipling in just 2 or 3 at a time, that's harder. And I think think about Jesus with the children. He blesses, touch. I can just see he's got his hand on each one of their heads, offers them a blessing. I don't know how long that took, but my guess is it took a while. If I could have been there to help out, to orchestrate things, I would have said, you just have everybody show up together at 6 o'clock. We do a general blessing. We'll have some music and we'll send you on your way. And then, Jesus and his buddies can go get a hamburger or something like that. But that's not how it worked. If a group is meeting over, doing something that's not kind of officially sanctioned, these breakout like renegade rogue groups, we can't count those people. We don't have an attendance record of them. I lose some control over that as well. So I'm not at the center of things. I've been trained to do that. I went to seminary,
Yep.
but it's not about me. Somebody else is discipling. And so I have to let go of control there. So it's harder, it takes time, takes longer time. It's harder to track. I can't see a number of how many people did this or that. And then and I've got to just let go of my need to be needed or whatever.
You're really doing a great job in a very witty way of talking about institutional Christianity has taught pastors, if you want to succeed with a lot of the leadership in a church, you got to bring metrics.
Right.
You got to hit those targets. You got to make the brand work. And by the way, I am the center of the hub and all the spokes flow out from me, which I think is a recipe, in my experience in the business world, for absolute burnout and disaster over time. You're very countercultural, I think, in some of the things that you're saying. I would say that less than 10% of the pastors that we're talking to feel comfortable at all not having their hand hovering over this process. And I would say this cultural challenge is something we ought to toss at Ray and put him on the hot seat here for just a minute. You up for that?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm really curious, Ray. You just recently approached one church with some of the material that we've scrimmaged in the Disciple Dilemma, saying, look, if you really want to make cultural change work, we can suggest a path forward. How'd that go for you, Dr. Monroe?
I'm involved in a smaller group within that church, and I have a really nice small community of people who care about each other, and we're really grappling with what the scripture teaches. They asked me what we wanted to do in the fall, and I said, "Hey, I've been thinking a lot about discipleship. It's sort of an artifact of working with you, Dennis. And so why don't we try and grapple with discipleship?" And I told them, one of the challenges we face is that we have made Christianity be a transaction. I give God my faith, I get my get out of hell free card, and then I just need to show up every once in a while, throw a little money in the plate, and churchy stuff is for the pastor. But if I really want to get gold stars, I disciple other people, but that means evangelism, not and apologetics. And so we have evangelism and apologetic stuff going on, but I don't know why we don't grapple with what John said. Looking back on what Matthew said, teach them my commandments. Clearly the church was screwing up. And so he writes in the Last Supper, Jesus looks them all in the eye and says, if you're really going to be my disciple, they'll know that, not because you're good at evangelism, but because you love one another.
Folks, we're back with Pastor Matt McCollum, the senior pastor at Trinity Presbyterian Church, Fairhope, Alabama. Raymond and I are starting to get some fascinating insight into what it means to be the CEO of an organization, as well as the shepherd of a group of believers, and dealing with culture.
And so, Matt, I wanted to ask you, how did you really move from thinking discipleship was really evangelism and getting more people active in the church, and see it more as the personal development of extending the kingdom of God by showing love to other people? How did you make that transition? Because that to me seems really odd for a pastor.
Well, and I don't know that I've arrived. These are aspirational kinds of things for me as well. But I do think making the church the goal or the end is a recipe for disaster, right? So the church is an instrument, is a tool. It's not the fourth member of the Trinity. It is, we started in a garden, right? No church. The end of Revelation, we've got a city, and John says there's no temple, right? John points out this to us. So the church is a beautiful thing. God is working through the church, but it's not ultimate. And I do think that's where we get a little mixed up, that the church is the goal. And this is a story from way back. I don't even know who to give credit to for this, but it's an image that's been really helpful for me in thinking about making the church ultimate. And it has to do with Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. So if you live in the South, you go through Atlanta, doesn't matter where you're headed. So this is the busiest airport in the world. And so, it's usually, it's a highly functioning place, and you go there and you spend an hour, and then you're on your way to where you want to be. But this guy said every once in a while, Hartsfield Atlanta Airport will get the scorecard wrong, and they will think they're winning if all of the planes are there at the hub and all the people are packed into the concourse. Like they'll think, oh, well, this is what an airport is. You all came to see us. So the airport in this analogy is not the destination, it's the connector. And I think that anybody who's been stuck in Atlanta Airport or any other airport knows that frustration of thinking, this is supposed to help me get where I need to go. I need the Atlanta Airport. I know that. I can't get anywhere without going through Atlanta, but it's not the destination. So I do think that when the church makes itself ultimate, then we get a little messed up in our minds. So how to think about the church as something that God has blessed, that people come and they get fed and they get equipped and they are encouraged in community, but then they get sent out. They are released to be the church in whatever that looks like is really a better way to look at it. And I understand all the hand wringing. Like, I get it. We've got a lot of real estate tied up in churches. There are a lot of jobs on the line. There's a lot of money involved with this. So I understand why people are really anxious about the buildings and the institution. I totally understand. But I do think that it's a much more exciting story to think of the church as a connector more than a destination. So,
Ooh.
Yeah, Matt, as we've talked to people, historically, people thought discipleship training was giving people enough apologetics and evangelical understanding so that they could convert people into the church. And so they saw the whole role of discipling as really evangelism, not teaching them, baptizing them, but mainly just evangelism. And yet, when we look around, the problem is not that we lack people showing up and becoming interested in the church. We will get people, and they only stay around for a few months. And so it's not evangelism that's our weak part, it's retention. How has your use of discipleship affected your retention? Have you had a challenge with retention? And how does discipling and retention overlap?
There's a couple of guys that are, for example, mentoring or walking with some of our younger adults.
Okay.
And I'm involved with those groups. Sometimes I'll sit in. They don't really want to hear from what I have to say, but I
Sure.
like to sit in with those folks. And we've got one family in our church who've got 5 kids. They're all like itty bitty. So they had 3, and then they were going to do, one more go around. They had twins. So this family is absolutely overwhelmed. And we were talking last week. This husband was talking about how he gets on his knees with his spouse every morning. And I was just blown away by that. And I thought, of course, with 5 kids, you might expect that's probably what you would need to do. But I thought, what a neat thing to have this. We had this kind of informal small group of guys. And for them, all these guys who are hustling, they're trying to get a business started. They're trying to juggle young children, haven't been married that long, all those kinds of things. And to see this guy to talk, be able to talk about what it means for him every morning, get on his knees beside his wife and just submit that day, just surrender that day. We've got another group that it took a couple of years, but this last kind of go around, people shared their testimonies. I mean, not just, legit, really
Opened up.
just opened up, very vulnerable. And it took a while. And we said before, this is hard. It takes a long time. It's in, one-on-one or very small groups. It just is not, it's not sexy. It's tough. But
Right.
we got to this place and it was really beautiful, like just for folks to get to that point. So I don't know how to connect people relationally, but it's got to be that way. Otherwise they will move on or just I have saw that, and this may be in your book, Dennis. So they said the number one reason that people are not in the church these days is because they have moved. I don't know if I may be stealing that from you, but I just thought, wow. So it's not maybe that people are dropping out of Christianity. Maybe people haven't lost their faith. They may just have moved and they've just not reconnected with the church.
The great de-churching, Jim Davis, Michael Graham came out this past year, speaks of the 40 million who grew up in the church and have exited the church, some with absolutely no intent to come back, some with like, I moved. I just
Right.
got busy with other stuff. I don't know anybody in this town. And this is the beauty of that stat, which I'm so glad you raised that. So Davis and Graham have concluded that 50% of the 40 million who exited would come back if just anybody would invite them to a church.
I totally agree with that.
About 5 months ago, you let me have a Zoom chat with the session. We chatted for a little while. I just kind of presented some findings and some thoughts. And then as I saw people beginning to light their torches, you shut the Zoom off. What we're really curious about is really good, punchy feedback that goes contra statements in the book so that we communicate better with people. We're perfectly happy to have people say, I think you don't have a clue what you're talking about. And by the way, some people have said that. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Some people have said that, right? Matt, what kind of things did your section look at and go, that dog don't hunt? They just don't have this figured out, right? Give us some feedback about it just didn't feel right, look right, or fit with us.
Yeah, I was anticipating much more pushback than we got because I've got a feisty session and they love, because I'll bring stuff to them from time to time and they are not scared to tell me how much they disagree with whatever. So I was really surprised at how well it did go over. And like I said, we did it almost chapter by chapter through that time. I think there were some things probably that resonated better with than others. And you're writing for a broader audience than a Reformed church located in the Bible Belt. So we talked about that. This is a bigger book than
okay. So you've seen the nice setup. He's been really nice. Now we're going to get to it.
I think the only real pushback that I would say has nothing to do with content, but it did seem like I would say I think the caution I would say is for church leaders in making these changes is you just got to bring people with you. So I know that your background as CEO and turnaround and all that kind of stuff, there's probably a little more immediacy to it. We've got this time frame. If you're not on board, you got to go or whatever. I'm not telling you your business, but that's probably a little different from the church.
Yeah.
That is change. You turn in a battleship. It is just takes forever to do anything. And so I think for leaders who might be watching it, don't be discouraged. And maybe this is the encouragement too. Don't be discouraged. When we first got here, we were just trying to, this church had been through a lot. We were trying to find a small win, just a small one. That's all I was looking for. Just give us a little something, and then we can build on that. But these things, you have a great section in the book towards the end there about strategy and culture, and the two are. It's fine to have strategy, but the DNA is deep in your church unless it's just a brand new church. It's if you've been around for 100
people will understand mentally what you're talking about, but they don't really have that narrative structure. They don't have that story so that they're living out that reality. So I think what you're saying is spot on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think about even after you've said it, then you've got to say it again, and then you got to say it another time. And then you've got, 6 months from now, you got another group, you got to say it again. And I feel like, oh goodness, but that's how these things work.
Sure.
And I think it's true for any organization, but it is especially true for the church. And so it takes time. I really appreciate what you all are doing. We pastors need a little push. We need help in having an outside voice that will say, hey, things are not going so well. Why are they not going so well? What are some things that we need to be thinking about? Because it's easy for us to get comfortable, complacent. We've talked about how we can do church in a way that's fairly easy, but that's not being faithful to the kingdom of God. When the end goal is not your church and having the sanctuary full, but it's really about the kingdom of God being a part of what God is doing here, and the church gets to come alongside that, then that's you all help us do that. So we appreciate you, even though we might disagree with you at times.
Matt, your session's been scrimmaging this issue of discipleship for arguably 2 or 3 years under your leadership. Are they thinking that, in fact, perhaps a piece of what Jesus showed us in the model of discipleship is missing? You have great preaching, great teaching, great programs, great community. Is it that your session does think that there may be a piece missing here, or are they still waiting to really grab this and run with it? What's your gut feel?
It's a great question, and I think that there are pieces of it that, yes, we are wholeheartedly bought into. So you asked earlier what are the things that we didn't like about the book. The thing that I think we most appreciate is the idea, and you began to talk about this as well, the idea of when the not main thing becomes the main thing, because we have seen that over and over again in churches in our tribe, where the level of noise and distraction in whether it be denominational stuff or cultural stuff or whatever, it just takes all the air out of the room. And this is not a political conversation. I'm not a culture warrior, but I have seen churches that just kind of lose their way because the main thing is no longer the main thing. So I think when we have a General Assembly that's meeting right now, even as we speak, and there'll be stuff that comes out of that. There's a group of absolute strangers that meet together for a week and make pronouncements about all kinds of very, very difficult concepts. And it's just lazy. From as far as I'm concerned, it's a lazy social justice something. And what it does is it distracts us from what it is we're supposed to do here. So I would say the session is firmly on board that we want to make the main thing the main thing. Now, how that gets worked out and what that looks like as far as the one-on-one discipleship, it's going to take us a while before we get there. But I think people are really resonate with, there are some of those sections that just help us to remember who we are and whose we are and what we're doing and why it matters. That I'm hopeful for. I'm excited about what the next chapter of this journey looks like, and I hope that we'd love to continue to be in partnership with you guys, whatever that might look like. So,
we're cheering for you.
Matt, you've been delightful. Your insights really keen, and I resonate with most of the things you said, especially when you talked about culture.
There was one book, I think maybe two, that I still have from seminary. Not many, but one is a practical theology book. It's called "Ministry is a High Calling, Aim Low," and it's just real practical stuff from a guy who has just been in this work for a long time, and he tells the story of a guy who is doing like a typical men's prayer breakfast kind of gathering. He's an airline pilot, and he's showing slides of cloud formations and sunsets and sunrises that he's taken outside the cockpit of his plane. I thought about you, Dennis, with the airplane stuff. But at the end of this little presentation, which would seem, just very generic, like you might have at any kind of men's gathering, he was answering questions, and one of the questions was, how do you deal with the I guess anxiety of being responsible for several hundred people on your airplane? And I love his response was, I find that if I get myself there safely, when I turn around, everybody else is safe as well. And I think that for the leader, that's the key. Are you getting yourself there safely? Likely that the folks who are under your leadership will be safe as well. So it's paying attention to your own soul, making sure you've got folks that you can be real with. You've got a group of folks who you can, kind of be an encouragement to and share with, and just you tend your own soul. Chances are everybody else will be okay as well.
Pastor Matt McCollum, Trinity Presbyterian Church, Fairhope, Alabama. Thank you for being with us on the Disciple Dilemma.
Thank you, Dennis and Ray. It was great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Guys. Thanks for all that you all do.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipledilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.